This is Building Your Classroom Culture for Movement with Broken Box Mime Theater. My name is Tasha Milkman. I'm the lead facilitator for the PD session. I'm the Associate Artistic Director for Broken Box and the Education Co-Lead. And you can see here in the video, we're doing our silent warm-up. I am going to talk over it, but as you can see in the video, this is completely in silence. I gave some nonverbal directions for everyone to follow at the beginning. We're standing in a circle and everyone is following along without any verbal directions for this part. So this is the way we typically start our lessons. When we're working with kids, we often do a verbal introduction first, but with adults, we were able to just start the lesson without saying anything at all. And this gives us the opportunity for everyone to do a warm-up, put a little bit of mime technique onto their bodies. We love doing this in silence. There's kind of a beautiful focus that comes into the room when we do longer sustained periods of silence in the classroom. And I am consistently like shocked and in awe of how long students can really sustain their focus in silence. If you're a classroom teacher, you probably don't experience too many, especially if you're a theater teacher, happily you don't experience too many long sustained silences in the classroom. But it's a great way to get everyone to focus in and to turn on a different part of their brain, perhaps. So that's one of the reasons that we do the silent warm-up, is just to bring everyone into focus. It's kind of a shift of attention. Another thing that we like about it is that it offers a sort of collaborative space where everybody's exploring at the same time in their own body, being in the circle and having to watch the facilitator to know how to mirror and where we're going next really puts the focus on away from people watching each other. So there isn't kind of an audience dynamic when nobody feels like they're performing for their peers. So it also feels kind of like a no failure exercise where everyone can physically participate without kind of the risk taking that's involved with getting up in front of the class and doing something physical. We also use this time to introduce some of the building blocks that we're going to explore later when we're doing a mime technique workshop, which you may or may not be doing. We like to introduce some of the basic elements of working with invisible objects. For example, in this silent warm-up, we do what we call clicking. Broken Box Mime technique calls the contact with an invisible object a click. And that's just that moment from when your hand goes from relaxed and being used as a hand to the tension and the kind of sharp click onto the shape of the object that we're showing in mime. So that's clicking. You'll also see us doing some isolation. That is showing that an object is staying stationary where our body moves around it. That's one that's kind of fun for students to practice. It's a physical skill that, just takes some cultivation. And then we do a little bit of relational distance. That's keeping your hands in the same relationship to one another when you're defining an object. Later on in this silent warm-up, we play with some hand shapes, and we get into some objects. We get into some environment. We show the rain. We show an umbrella. We also show a cup, clicking onto a cup and taking a drink, and then cheersing to a neighbor. That's also a nice thing in mime, is that there's we can have some interaction there without any physical contact. So that's also a nice thing to kind of start with some boundaries and working together in a simple way without having to have physical contact. Okay, that's the silent warm-up. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about Broken Box Mime before we jump in. Broken Box was founded in 2011. We are a performance company in New York. We devise and perform original mime performances. Our main stage work is usually geared for adults, and we also have kids shows for families, and we perform here in New York. We also tour. We love this medium. We know that it has become antiquated in our contemporary U.S. culture, and we like to say we contemporizes it, and we are using the traditional form that has a lot of Eurocentric history, and we are transforming it and making it really fresh and through our contemporary lens as a group of artists that are coming from a variety of walks of life here in New York, and really interested in the power of the medium to tell stories. So that brings me to another point about our technique. We are not a technique-focused company. Our company members have a lot of background and training in different types of mime technique, and what we like to focus on is the correct technique is the one that is best to tell the story. So the final sort of arbiter of whether our technique is effective is our audience. And we like that. We also think that that's kind of an important ethos for us, is that there's no right way or wrong way for a body to move, for a body to communicate. As long as what is, intended to be communicated is communicated, then it's right. So we respect some of the traditions that do have kind of a codified way of moving, but that's not our focus. We really like to focus on story and use the technique to tell in service of the story primarily. So we're here from Broken Box Ed, which is, of course, our education wing. And we have 3 kind of key central tenets to our work in classrooms, and that is embodied learning. So we feel like whatever you're learning, it's great to get your body involved, especially those kinesthetic learners, but everybody can benefit from embodied learning. Storytelling, like I mentioned, we are a narrative-focused company. We are not so interested in doing kind of tricks or just pure mime technique, but more interested in developing complex stories and empowering students to use whatever form they're using in service of telling a story. And 3 is collaboration and relationship building. We work with a company model, so our artists are in a long-term relationship with the company. There's 19 of us, and we are committed to working together for the foreseeable future. So we're not like many theater artists who kind of come together for a show and then give everyone a hug and say goodbye. And we find that those long-term relationships and that kind of collaborative culture of our company really makes our work richer. So we like to bring that ethos into the classroom and cultivate a culture of collaboration and healthy relationships and the power of working as an ensemble in the classroom. We're also Arthur Miller Cultural Partners, and we are conducting residencies with the Arts Office in schools across the city, so you might be familiar with us. And I'll also say we always love to hear from teachers, so feel free to reach out to us. We're always available via email at brokenboxmime@gmail.com. Okay, so before we jump in, we usually like to start our workshops before we move with students and just share kind of an invitation for everyone to move in a way that feels authentic for your body today. So everyone's body is different, first off. Also, on any given day, somebody's body might be different. You might wake up and your neck might be feeling kind of stiff from the way you slept. That's okay. It might just affect the way you move. So please move in a way that feels authentic to you. There's no right way. There's no wrong way. I'll also say that I feel most safe when I know that nobody's going to touch my body. So I also ask that as we move, just move without touching anything that doesn't belong to you, including anyone else's body. All right, here we go. Okay, so our first exercise is called the invitation. And for this exercise, I'm asking everyone to stay where they're seated, but to imagine a student of theirs. Could be a student that is currently in your class, could be one that you've had in the past, could be totally an imaginary student. But embody that student just where you're seated. Kind of bring their physicality to mind, or imagine what their body might be, what shape their body might be in, and how it might be feeling. And just sit as that student for a moment. And now, as that student, I want you to find something that you can see in the room that is blue. And just look at it with your eyes. Hold your focus on the blue thing. And let that go. And now, as that student, look around the room, find something that's made of metal. And when you can see something that's made of metal, that's your personal object of metal, of personal choice of an object of metal, just hold it in your gaze. Take a look at it. And you can go ahead and let that go. And now I want you to find something in the room that is soft. Whatever that means to you might mean something different to a different person. Find something that you think looks soft. And this time I want you to point to it with your hand. So just point to it. All right, and let that go. And now I want you to look around the room, find something that you have a version of at home. Again, this could mean something very different to different people, but find something in the room that you have a version of at home and point to it. And then you can let that go. Now I want you to find something in the room that you think is beautiful. Something in the room that you like the way it's designed, you like the way it looks. And this time I want you to lean towards it. So whatever that means for you, you might be leaning in your seat, you might be tilting your body towards it with your chest, you might be leaning your shoulder towards it, you're just leaning towards that object that you find attractive in the room. All right, now I want everybody to stand up. Just stay where you are, standing up. And this time, you're going to just walk towards that object that you find is attractive without touching anyone else. Get as close to that object as you possibly can. It shouldn't be a person. Great, and then you can let that go. All right. And now we're doing a little bit of processing about that activity. I think the prompts that I gave are a little bit different than the ones on the chart here. Of course, you can make up your own. The idea here was to move from a movement that was very internal and very personal, maybe just the eyes, to increasing the external movement, and also creating kind of a new relationship with the space, and maybe discovering things that we didn't notice before about the space, and using those objects in the room as anchors and invitations to physically engage with the classroom in a new way. You'll notice that none of those prompts involved inhabiting a character or doing anything beyond kind of small pedestrian gestures and movement. That's because it's also, when we talk about a culture for movement does not have to be rolling around on the floor, of course, but it doesn't have to be big abstract expression. And also we recognize that some students have that kind of protective armor on for a reason, and it might not be your goal to have them remove it. They might be able to move and bring themselves into the space just with their eyeballs, or just with their hands, or just with making a choice in their physical environment and physically moving towards it. So we consider this exercise as perhaps a scaffolding towards more expansive movement in the classroom. Of course, making whatever this ritual is your own would be advised. Okay, so this game is called the translation game, and here we ask teachers to come up with phrases that they hear every day. So we often like to start our games with a word bank. This gets everyone involved, and if it's a guessing game, which, spoiler alert, this is a guessing game, it really creates a sense of, it increases the odds of success for the performing students, and it also is like emphasizing that co-created ethos that we like to cultivate, that this ensemble today is creating the content that we're creating. So some of the suggestions, I don't know if you can read on the board, but it says, "That's fire," "I'm tired," can I go to the bathroom? Good morning, and I don't know. So we asked for 3 volunteers, and they went ahead and volunteered for this. So they're now taking a look at all of the options, and they're going to pick a phrase, and then they're going to perform a gesture to communicate that phrase without any language at all. So in this game, there is the dynamic of the performer and the performers and the audience. We do think that there's a little bit more safety, of course, in having a couple performers up, even though they're not performing together. They're all going to be performing kind of their own version of this. The fact that they don't have to do it by themselves creates some safety, and then you'll see why also it's important to have more than one. Great, so you see the gestures here. It looks like 2 of them picked the same phrase. So we asked them to do the gestures a couple times all together. Once again, that's kind of doing it in chorus is a little bit more of a inviting space than doing it solo to start with. But of course, we did make a big leap from the invitation into this exercise. This might not be a day 1 exercise for your students. So we could see this participant does her gesture, and people are guessing that it's I have to go to the bathroom. We see the next gesture. I think some people, and so once again, the word bank is useful because the audience also is looking at that word bank. It really narrows down what it could be. His was I don't know. And then our third actor, I think there's some discussion about, he's confirming that it's I don't know. The third person is doing another version of I don't know, which of course provides us a really great space to then explore the body language that these 2 actors are using to convey the same phrase, and we can really break it down. So we're looking now at this one depiction of I don't know, and we like to teach students about the 3 big communicators in body language. We like to focus on the face, the hands, and the shape or the movement of the body. So here it's a great example. You can see what her hands are doing, see what the face is doing, see what the body is doing. And then, as a group, we really broke down as a class what each of those things are communicating. What does that side-to-side gesture communicate? What are those upturned hands showing? The shoulders slightly lifted. And then the facial expression, which we talked a bit about. So this is a great exercise to solicit some conversation about body language. Here in this workshop, we really stuck with this same group of performers and these same 3 gestures. We found that there was a lot to discuss in doing kind of compare contrast of the 2 versions of I don't know. And that was kind of a rich way of breaking down body language and getting people to be really conscious of it. And of course, this is a great way to work in mime, but of course, if your students are creating characters in text-based work, being more intentional about what they're doing physically is a great lesson. Not to mention being more intentional and thoughtful about the body language that we're using in our day-to-day lives. This is a really valuable place to start with these kind of this phrase activity that we call the translator. Another nice thing about that we find about using that phrase book or that phrase bank, I should say, is that because it's student generated, there's kind of a sense of ownership there. It can get silly, but it's like using these kind of pedestrian phrases, just like these phrases that we hear every day. It keeps it kind of grounded in the real world. We're not asking them to become an animal or some of our kind of middle school and high school students get a lot out of this activity, especially if they're kind of self-conscious about being very silly, doing a gesture that's pedestrian and that they might do in their day-to-day life, is it allows them to perhaps stay in their comfort zone even as they're stepping into performance. So this is the end of the translation game. We're now just kind of taking the opportunity to build a teeny tiny story here. So Becky is asking each of the participants to do their gesture when she approaches them, and you'll kind of see what story emerges. So it's super simple. She kind of came in as the teacher and and contextualized these gestures that were originally just kind of in isolation into a story. So that's of course what we're often driving towards in Broken Box is creating a story and taking opportunities like that to illustrate how when put in context, something can take on a new meaning. Once again, here we have another example, taking those three participants and contextualizing them into one group. Recontextualizes what's happening in the story as well. So yeah, our imaginations will make meaning of whatever we choose to do, which is of course and also like an empowering thing to share with students, is that whatever choices we make on stage have the opportunity to make meaning for the audience. And in this case, like even just that small change of shifting the performers closer together and then having them do that one gesture in unison really unlocked a different story for all of us. Okay, so this game is called this is called Pass the Object, Become the Object. And it's kind of like musical chairs. There's going to be some music playing. I'm going to start by showing an object in mime. So I'll establish the invisible object, and then I'll pass it to another participant, and that participant will show using that object and interacting with it. Then they'll pass it to someone else. And if you are holding the object when the music stops, you must become the object. So this is like kind of a fun, silly game. You can choose to play it with the whole class all at once, as we're doing here. I didn't ask for volunteers to participate. I just am assuming the whole class is participating. You could decide what your class culture needs. You could have a few students up. You could have like an opt-in sort of gesture for, as the students are passing the object, they could be volunteering to receive it, or opting out if that's how you want to run it. So here you can see we're getting started. I'm using the object. One that is familiar to us, especially the last couple years. You might know what it is. If you don't, you might watch a few other students, in this case participants, use that object. So the first person is using it, and they're going to pass it to the next person who's going to start using it. Oh, the music stopped, and that person has to become the object. So as you can see, not a lot of time to think. You kind of have to go with your first impulse. It's fun. It's silly. Of course, students who are a little bit more self-conscious about being silly, this wouldn't be like a day one activity. You might want to scaffold towards something like this. But powerful to explore the ways that our whole bodies can represent, even beyond character, and represent an object. There's a lot of fun scale shifts that are possible in mime, specifically out of all the mediums. And yeah, this is kind of a playful way to also have students kind of expand their thinking about what they can show with their bodies on stage. Also an opportunity to talk about proxy. Proxy is a term that we use in Broken Box to talk about when a part of our body or our whole body actually stands in for an object. And that's different from miming an object where our body is maybe outlining the negative space to show where that object is. When our body actually stands in for that object, we call that a proxy. So in this case, our whole body is proxying the object. We also might talk about using our hand to proxy an object, like maybe a cell phone. You could use your hand to be the actual phone, or you could use your hand to pick up the phone in negative space. So that's a little bit of mime technique to build in there as well. But this activity, of course, can be used in a variety of ways. I think primarily getting students to get out of their heads and embrace kind of a more imaginative way of using their body to represent an object. Okay, so this is our next game. It's called The Door. We covered element 1, which was the invitation, element 2, which was scaling, talking about how to scale up into more complex movement, more risk-taking movement. So this game, The Door, you can see Becky is setting up by drawing here on the chart paper. This could be a whiteboard, obviously, or there's some other ways you can set this up, which I'll mention after you see how it works. But this is a completely nonverbal game. Once again, those are really fun ways to like pull kids in and invite them to interpret directions without talking. So I'm gonna stop talking for a moment while you can watch Becky do this nonverbally. Great, so you kind of see how it works. She's continuing non-verbally. I'm going to jump in though, just for the sake of making sure it's clear. So she's establishing that there's this door. She's kind of re-establishing it. And then in this game, there's a setup of some need or some conflict, right? So she's got a problem, and one of these objects is going to be the solution to it. And so this is, once again, you could kind of have some established expectations in your classroom about whether or not students just pop up and join in a game like this. That's kind of how we were doing it. Or you could have a way of participants kind of being lined up if they were ready to be playing this game rather than kind of coming from the audience as we have it. Another way of playing this game is, instead of drawing on the whiteboard, you could have cards with pictures or like pre-created imagery. You could also Becky's saying now, you could hand the marker to some student who could draw on the board or draw on a piece of paper. Of course, that element of drawing is another kind of skill. And you could just as easily have like a stack of photographs, for example, and you could invite students to put like 3 up there. And so now Becky just drew the heart. You can scale this and scaffold it from the objects were very concrete. She was thirsty, she needed a glass of water. Her hair was tangled, she needed a comb. What does it look like if somebody needs love? And then, of course, different students can pop in and out of different roles in this, being the person who's demonstrating the problem or being somebody who comes in to solve it. And what does that look like for things that are a little bit more abstract? What are the types of things that one might need? Could be the prompt for students to then draw or like I said, come up with images. That the drawing piece is not essential. Okay, so the last exercise is called the Metaphor Project, and we introduced this in brief. This could be an entire unit. It really could deserve its own professional development workshop to dig into all the different ways it can be used. But in brief, this is how it works. These big posters were set up before the class. The one that I'm holding says, "What is something you can't live without?" And as participants came in, they were handed a sticky note, and everybody contributed something in writing to that board just at the beginning of class as people entered. Then on the other side, we have a series of similes. These ones we pre-wrote. Of course, if your class has done this before or they're ready to do it themselves, they could do those as part of the assignment or as part of the exercise, but we set it up ahead of time, which is, I think, a great way to start this with students so they can get an idea of how it works and then they can generate their own. So a volunteer is coming up, picked one of the things they can't live without. Doesn't have to be the one that person contributed, could be anything. And then they pick a metaphor that they think could go with it. So this one says, laughter is like finding a way out. So this was from student generated ideas, and then another student generated the unique combination of ideas. And this is all in writing, but it can be done non-verbally, of course. And now I have 3 people up who are going to physicalize this metaphor. Laughter is like finding a way out. So the person on the left is going to be laughter, and then the person in the middle is going to embody the transition, is like. And that's where you can prompt students to get kind of creative. There's a lot of different ways to show that kind of relationship or transition. So there's kind of no wrong way, but there'd be, it's kind of a fun challenge for students to work on how to do that. So we can see laughter is like finding a way out. Great. So that is the first sort of level of making metaphors. And this structure has a lot of opportunities to expand, or you can contract it and really just do it kind of in brief the way we did it. But you could also kind of construct a whole unit around it, which is what I used to do when I was teaching a specific residency with 9th graders who were exploring memoir, and they were creating personal memoirs for using this kind of structure. But the other opportunity that we found this useful, especially in the context of creating a culture for movement, is the opportunity to have different students in the class take on different roles with this. I mentioned before that we have like the kind of explicit role of the playwright, the director, performers, and audience. And this project, I think, allowed us to kind of formalize those roles a little bit more. The playwright is the one, of course, putting together the metaphors and putting together the words from the class-generated banks. And then the director then could be shaping the performance and maybe helping the performers make some decisions about how that transition that is demonstrated, and how to make both sides of the simile really clear. And then audiences can actively give feedback, respond to the work, could be writing some response and certainly sharing what they saw, which could inform then a revision of the performance. And then, of course, the performers are embodying the work and responding to their director, to their playwrights, to the class as well, and contributing their own ideas. So I think kind of laying out those roles can be a powerful way to also reinforce that there's more than one way to participate as a mover in the classroom. You don't have to be performing to be moving. You don't have to be performing to put your body into the space and put your ideas into the space. So offering a couple different ways to do that we have found to be empowering. Okay, just in wrapping up here, of course I'll reiterate that the wonderful opportunity of these professional development sessions is the skill share that happens. And I, of course, I'm not able to articulate all the brilliant things that were said in the room, from all of the sort of coming together of the minds of all the educators that were there. So that was really valuable for everyone, and it's just always such a treat to connect with like-minded folks and people that are working in different contexts to hear reflections and best practices. That being said, the three ideas that we were putting forward for building a culture for movement in the classroom, the first was the invitation, was in accepting that students are coming from perhaps a different environment in which that they maintain whatever their physical armor is, for reasons for their own safety perhaps, and inviting them to come into your space and cultivating a different relationship with that space may take time. It takes intention. There's many ways to do that, and we put forward an exercise that had to do with going from a place of personal relationship with the room and kind of bringing that outward, and then allowing students to choose different parts of the room to engage with in a very kind of minimal but movement-centered way. And then, of course, wading in was the next kind of topic heading that we had. I used the word scaffolding and scaling a couple times in the workshop as well. This is just the idea that we're not going to go from 0 to 60 with these movement exercises as we did a little bit in this workshop, because it's a group of theater teachers that are ready to just jump in physically. But thinking about how to scaffold your students towards the type of movement that you're interested in exploring with them. It might take time, and certainly might take some kind of graduated steps towards more complex or more vulnerable types of movement. And of course, the third thing was having variety, and that the metaphor and the door, and kind of throughout the workshop, we were trying to offer examples of how different participants could engage with an activity in different ways. Of course, there's tons of other ways you could define variety. There's lots of different types of movement that are possible in a classroom. We're, of course, mime artists, so that is our lens, but there's any number of different ways that that students can move, be that expressive or functional. So any type of movement in the classroom can be celebrated and cultivated as part of the culture for movement. It's been a real pleasure to share these thoughts with you. Please do engage with us online. You can check out our website and join our email list, brokenboxmime.com. Our email address is brokenboxmime@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram at brokenboxmime. And please, share your thoughts and continue the conversation with us. Thank you.